Hey, Soul Boom Generation, I've got a really exciting announcement for you. We've got a Substack. If you love the Soul Boom podcast and book and ideas, then you're going to want to get our weekly newsletter Substack sent to your inbox. It's magnificent. There's going to be fantastic guest authors. Some are written by me. A lot of them delve into the ideas around the podcasts that we're doing that week. So sign up, please subscribe. Go to soulboom.substack.com. Thank you.
We were beaten, however you can imagine. We were spit on. I was angry primarily. I was bleeding, but I was angry. I remember that about 10 minutes into it, I was kind of like in a twilight zone. I could not really fully grasp what was going on anymore. I couldn't feel the pain. But I remember looking across the street and looking at all these parents that were passing by and thinking that what has happened to this population? That they become like this. They're just watching. They're seeing them. They're killing two boys. They just don't care. Has God forgotten these people? What has happened to them?
Hey there, it's me, Rainn Wilson, and I want to dig into the human experience. I want to have conversations about a spiritual revolution. Let's get deep with our favorite thinkers, friends, and entertainers about life, meaning, and idiocy. Welcome to the Soul Boom Podcast. Hey, everybody. In this episode of Soul Boom, I'm really excited to talk to a dear friend of mine, someone that I've known at least for 15 years. Payam Zamani is a tech entrepreneur, a fellow member of the Bahá'í faith, philanthropist, so many things, a great dad. And how exciting is this that I have my podcast, and guess what? I can bring my friends on my podcast, and he's written a book that is fantastic. And I'm not just saying that. It's a page turner. It's really exciting. It's called Crossing the Desert, The Power of Embracing Life's Difficult Journeys. Oh, look, it's got a little quote on the front cover. Who's this? A must-read, big-hearted book, harrowing and yet full of hope. Rainn Wilson. I got blurbed, baby. It's an incredible story. He's got an incredible story. I'm really excited to talk to him about it. Payam, welcome to Soul Boom.
Thank you, Rainn. It really feels good to be in a place that I have been welcomed with so much love. So Thank you.
Really, your story comes in 3 or 4 main parts. Spoiler alert, you flee Iran after the Iranian Revolution, and then you come to the United States, a dirt poor refugee living in the Central Valley, Modesto, California. Get yourself an education. And then 10, 12 years later, you've got an IPO going. You started an online business, AutoWeb.com, and you have an IPO of almost $1 billion. That right there is an incredible story, and there's whole other parts of you that we hope to get to know. For folks who don't know, Baha'is in Iran, members of the Baha'i faith, are treated very poorly, especially by the clergy and the current theocracy. But it has had a checkered and tragic past over the past 150, 170 years. Tens of thousands of early members of the Baha'i faith put to death, and just a constant kind of living in trauma with the Baha'i faith. But can you give us a little bit of background of the Baha'is in Iran?
I mean, as you mentioned, Baha'is have been persecuted for a very long time in Iran from the inception of the faith in the mid-1800s. But then a lot of people, they tend to believe that if they know the Baha'is and they know a little bit about the Baha'i faith, that before the Iranian Revolution, life must have been good for them. Not really so, unless you lived in Tehran, and not just in Tehran, but northern Tehran. If you live there, the chances are life was acceptable. But outside of Tehran, where my family lived, it was very different. So there's no question that there is a correlation between the less educated, unfortunately, you are, and the further away you are from these centers of culture and, kind of like worldliness, you're more likely to support that traditional way of thinking
Yeah.
that the clergy brought. What's interesting is that um, I would say that today's Iranians in Iran, even in those small villages, are by far more accepting of Baha'is than they were during the Shah's regime because they saw what the clergy are capable of when they were put in charge, and they also controlled their lives too, not just the lives of the Baha'is.
Yeah. What are the top 3 reasons that the clergy of Iran and so much of the population of Iran are anti-Baha'is? I mean, Baha'is, for the
Mm,
people who don't know, like peace loving, it's about peace and unity, it's about serving the poor, it's about getting an education. There's nothing in the Baha'i faith that, in fact, Baha'is are told to be obedient to the government that they live under. So the Baha'is are not trying to overthrow anyone. We're not even actively supposed to proselytize. So Baha'is aren't supposed to like actively try and convert people. There's just this peaceable population of this homegrown religion. Why all of the violence and hatred?
I mean, I think if you ask 10 different people, they'll each give you 3 different reasons.
Okay.
But I will tell you that from my perspective, one is the fact that Iranians and the clergy are so big on the fact that Islam is the last religion. So the Baha'i faith came over 1,000 years after Islam. So they feel that that's absolutely
Because Muhammad
blasphemy.
said in the Quran, and he has a quote that says he calls himself the seal of the prophets. So
That's
that
exactly
one
it.
phrase has been interpreted by most of the Muslim world that there will never be another prophet or manifestation or divine teacher that comes down after Muhammad in the year 622.
Exactly. And also, it is not that uncommon that religions, they accept the religions before them, but not the ones after them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is an area that they have a problem with. The second thing is that as Baha'is, we believe that given that for the most part we are all educated, we no longer need clergy. We don't need to have a middleman between us and God. Well, Iran is run by the clergy. I'm guessing that they're not too happy about that teaching either.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many others. I mean, we have the Baha'i faith kind of like gets rid of the dogmas and superstition and so on. One of the teachings I love the most, probably one of the reasons that I personally have that connection to the Baha'i faith, is the one that says science and religion should agree. And if they don't, it's religion that is in fault because then it's no longer makes sense. It's superstition. And if you go back to, let's say, a few decades ago when my dad was young, the idea of education, Western style education, was frowned upon. It was viewed as a way to, in a sense, take people away from the Muslim faith. So, when my dad was a kid and he wanted to go to school, his dad was very much of a fundamentalist. He would say, "No, if you go to school, you'll become a Baha'i," and that was the thinking that went on in many of those small towns and
Right.
villages. So,
Education in those parts of the Muslim world at that time was going to, what's it called? Madrasa? What's it called?
yeah, you would need to learn how to read and how to read Quran. That's all you
That's
needed.
it. Just
That's it.
memorize the Quran, pretty
That's it.
much. Yeah.
Yes.
So the idea of learning arts and sciences and
Yes.
culture and history and of course in the Baha'i faith too, we're taught that in the individual investigation of truth, we don't accept just the truth of our parents or the truth of our clergy or the truth of our culture and investigate the truth for ourselves. That's again a pretty progressive idea.
It's interesting. I was just talking to somebody else this past week that um, I need to really go back and peel the onion to think about the challenges I faced because at the time living in Iran, that was normal to me. It didn't take till many years later for me to experience human rights and how life should be like to realize that was not okay.
But you were bullied a lot.
I was bullied a lot. There were many stores that would not sell us the basic necessities, milk or whatever, that they will not sell us because we were Baha'is. The fact that you're in a group, people come and they shake everyone's hands, but they don't shake your hand
So
because
they don't touch the Baha'is like they're dirty or something?
absolutely,
Mhm.
because you're dirty. You cannot, washing will not clean you. Um, I mean, my grandmother, my dad's mom, would not touch me because my dad had become a Baha'i himself, and she was a Muslim. She was a devout Muslim. She will not touch me, her grandson, because I was dirty. And
Wow,
so
that's
this goes
astonishing. Your
deep.
grandmother would not touch you.
This goes deep.
Wow. Yeah, that is deep. And there's several 100,000 Baha'is in Iran now, maybe more, 500,000, maybe 1 million, maybe more.
Yeah, I mean, nobody knows. Recently, some Western organization did a survey, and there seems to be a lot more than that, but nobody really knows. But at the time when we had real statistics, there were more Baha'is in Iran than all other religious minorities combined, uh, outside of Islam, of course.
What made life in Iran unbearable that you needed to cross the desert?
So there were problems that all Iranians were dealing with. And it wasn't just unique to Baha'is, such as getting bombed by Iraq. And that
Right.
war went on for 8 years. I talk about this in my book that every Thursday for 8 years, every town in Iran had a mass funeral just because of the boys that would come back from the front line that were killed.
People forget about that war. So you had the Iranian Revolution, and then the first thing they did is go to war against Iraq, right?
Yeah, well,
Or
I mean,
Iraq
Iraq
when it-
attacked Iran.
Yeah, okay.
But yes, that's exactly what happened. And then on top of that, you have, there wasn't enough food. So food was rationed. You would have to go stand in long lines and get access to, the kind of essentials that you needed. And
Why didn't your family leave Iran after the revolution in 79, 80? Because many Baha'is left at that very specific junction.
my parents were not interested to leave because they felt that staying behind when Baha'is are being persecuted, when Baha'is are being killed, is a form of resistance. And particularly my dad did not think that would be a good idea. And but life progressively got worse in Iran. Just politically got worse, and just the environment got worse. We had the war going on, and then the situation for Baha'is. Every day, I remember my dad used to work for the local spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of Tehran, and he would come back home every night, and he would tell us who the government had killed the day before, what Baha'is that my mom and dad knew who was killed. I remember there was this surgeon, Dr. Hakim, that that my mom knew well. One night, told us about him. Another night about my mom's second cousin that was killed, Mr. Roshani. Another time was her another second cousin that was killed. It was an ongoing thing
It
all
went
the
from
time.
dozens to hundreds of Baha'is
Absolutely.
being killed. There was a big outcry from the United Nations and other countries, and then it kind of went more underground, and they would just get disappeared.
That's exactly
Much
it.
more convenient to just have them disappear than to have them like hung in the public square.
And then you fast forward to 1981 when I was expelled from school. And that was one of those life moments that is, of course, etched in my mind and something that I think in many ways shaped who I am today. That's one of those events that shaped me. And so here I am in this middle school. There's one other Baha'i boy, probably about 600 students attend this school. And they had this public mass prayer they would do every day at noon in the school. And then there was this religious teacher responsible to make sure that all the students are good Muslims and so on. And he carried a gun to make sure that was happening.
Sure.
And he would come to us. He would say that you should join us for this mass prayer. And we would politely let him know that as Baha'is, we have our own prayers. And he would be very cordial. He would say, oh, okay, fine, no problem, no problem. And he would go away. One day, me and this other friend, we are sitting in the classroom, but we can hear his sermon. And during his sermon, he says that today we're going to get rid of the Baha'i boys. We're going to cleanse our school of these Baha'i boys. And of course, what happens is that the school ends, and me and this boy were like, this is going to be an ugly day. We're just sitting in the courtyard of the school, and the faculty are leaving the school. And we asked a few of them, would they give us a ride? Of course, they said no. They themselves, even if they wanted to, they'd be in danger. by doing that. So they all left. And then just I remember that eerie moment that there's us, and then I see 50, 60, I don't know how many kids outside of the school with sticks, rocks, whatever you can imagine, waiting for us. And we kind of looked at each other after a while. We thought, well, they're going to come in if we don't go out. Let's show some courage and walk out. And we did. I called that the bleeding mile. We were about a mile away from home. And
Pelted.
yeah, we were beaten, however you can imagine. We were spit on for about a mile by all these kids. Frankly, I remember that about 10 minutes into it, I was kind of like in a twilight zone. I could not really fully grasp what was going on anymore. I couldn't feel the pain. But I remember looking across the street and looking at all these parents that were passing by and thinking that what has happened to this population? That they become like this. You look at those parents.
People are out on the street watching.
They're just
all this.
watching. They're seeing them. They're killing two boys. They just don't care. Has God forgotten these people? What has happened to them? And I made it home, and I remember that, I was angry primarily. I was bleeding, but I was angry from all the spit. And you could literally wring out spit out of my clothes. And my hair was flat from spit. And I remember that I wanted to go back and fight them. Luckily my grandmother, my mom's mom, was with us. And she stayed, she basically held me back, let me go out. But that's one of those moments that clearly, gets to define you.
Then a decision is made by the family that they need to smuggle you out of the country. The country wouldn't let you just leave. You had to get smuggled out. You couldn't get a passport or say, we want to emigrate or anything like that. That wasn't an option.
No, the Iranian government had also made it impossible for Baha'is to leave Iran. They had taken our passports away.
But which just seems odd to me that, we despise the Baha'is. We're going to torture, disappear them, hang them in public squares, make life impossible. But we're also not going to let them leave. What was the thinking there? Why wouldn't they just say, closed borders, except Baha'is, you guys can all go. We hate you. You can
I know,
go.
one would think that would be the smartest thing to do. We don't like you, so go.
Yeah.
But no, they wanted to cleanse the world of us. They wanted to get rid of us. They wanted to remove us from existence. So it is, they didn't want us to go elsewhere and teach the Baha'i faith in another part of the world. They wanted to cleanse the world of the existence of Baha'is. So they thought by keeping us there.
It's a little bit final solution-y.
It is. They either thought that they're going to kill us or we're going to change our mind about being Baha'is.
Yeah. Or just torture, make life impossible. And again, I want to say to listeners and viewers, this is not all Muslims.
No.
This is most Muslims are allowing and peaceable. Right. This is really a reflection on this very kind of corrupt, backward fundamentalist clergy, and this is 150 years of history, pressures coming from that very specific direction. So our kind of story here isn't about Islam or Muslims. This is about this certain faction of Shiite Muslims that made life a living hell for Baha'is.
I absolutely agree, and frankly, I would say that if it wasn't probably for many of those Muslims, probably they would have killed all Baha'is. So there is and you got to also keep in mind, Baha'i faith is a new religion. So all Baha'is in Iran, they have Muslim family members. So it is not as though, or Jewish family members, or Zoroastrian family members. So the population is very much intermingled. It's not as though they can tell from the color of your skin that, you must be a Baha'i. We're all part of the same ethnicity and so on.
Sure. Hey, everybody, it's me, Rainn. I want to share something with you. I have gone through periods of my life where I have felt a little bit lost in the chaos, in the anxiety. I often am searching for some clarity. So I want to share something really special. It's an app called Waking Up. This is founded by the great Sam Harris. You've heard of Sam Harris. He's also a neuroscientist. And Waking Up is an incredible arsenal, is the best way to describe it, of mindfulness, meditation, so many resources for mental health, all grounded in secular techniques, and it has approaches baked into it that actually work. There's so many different tools for my spiritual toolbox, and I really can't recommend it more highly. Soul Boom listeners can get their first month for free, plus you'll save $30 on the in-app price. If you go to wakingup.com/soulboom, you can start your free month today. That's wakingup.com/soulboom to get a free month plus $30 off.
Think of it this way. If you are a mother and a law-abiding mother, how do you find a smuggler? You know, where do you go to find a smuggler? They don't have a sign.
Part one, find a smuggler.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there wasn't like Craigslist of like the smugglers section. Yeah.
Exactly, or Yellow Pages will have that. So you typically would find a smuggler by talking to others who had smuggled their family members out to see if they could make any recommendations for a good smuggler. And for one with good reviews.
Is there Yelp?
Yeah, exactly.
The smuggler gets 4.5 stars.
That's right.
Had an excellent experience with him.
Our son arrived alive. So they found
How much money did they have to pay the smugglers to get you out?
About $10,000, which
Holy moly.
was a lot of money. I mean, this is Iran, and so that was a ton of money, and it's like life savings. And so, but that's what they took. And I remember the final night that I was in Iran. So I was at my cousin's home. My mom is there. We lived in Shiraz. I said goodbye to my dad. I'm in Tehran with my mom. Met the smuggler. Smuggler got a picture of me, and I told my mom, I'm going to go for a walk. The next morning, we were supposed to be on a 24-hour bus ride to the border town. So I started walking the streets of Tehran. I'm 16. I love the city, and I knew that city well. I used to go everywhere on my own. I was very independent. And I remember I was just thinking that I had this deep sadness. I don't want to leave. My parents are here, but I feel like I don't have a choice. And as I was walking, I passed by this movie theater that was showing an Iranian movie. I decided to go in and just watch one last Iranian movie, and saw that. And in Iran, you go to a movie theater, everybody is having sunflower seeds, and they spit them out, and sometimes hits the back of your neck, and everybody's smoking. So you can kind of see the movie as the smoke, makes it up in the movie theater. And then at 9 p.m. I walked out, and I was walking. This is July, so it's a warm night. I'm walking back to my cousin's home, and I'm thinking my mom's got to be worried that where is he? But it was kind of odd thinking about that my mom is just going to hand me to smugglers in 24 hours.
Wow.
She's not going to know where I'm going to be for a long time. Wow. This is nothing to worry about.
How hard that would be. I mean, I have a 19-year-old son, as you know, thinking about putting a 16-year-old version of him in the hands of smugglers to try and get across, what was it, Pakistan or Afghanistan or both?
Pakistan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you take a 24-hour bus to a border town. Take us through some of the highlights or lowlights, as it were, of this odyssey, because it is absolutely blood-chilling. It's harrowing thinking about a teenager going through this.
So we had to take a bus ride from Tehran to Zahedan. Zahedan is kind of like where Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan meet. And it is kind of like this rustic town. There are very few trees. We had to drive for 24 hours through what is called Dasht al-Lut, or the emptiness desert. If you look up online, you'll see that NASA has named it the hottest place on the planet. They recorded 152 degrees Fahrenheit as the hottest day.
Holy
in Dasht
moly.
al-Lut. I know, it's amazing. So, and July 7th is when we're driving
the height
through
of summer.
The height of summer. So we get to, and they had asked me.
So did you just drive, like the middle of the night, you get in a truck and they just take off into the desert across the border?
Well, we took a bus from Tehran to Zahedan.
Right.
And this is like Iranian bus company. But the smuggler had asked my mom and I to not sit next to each other. This is a 24-hour bus ride. They wanted to make sure that we're not going to raise any suspicious. We got to the town. We got off the bus. And they had asked me to not say goodbye to my mom, to not talk to her, not to touch her.
Oh, my God.
And so you can imagine, I'm there, I get off the bus, and my heart is pounding, and I got to walk to the side of the road. I know somebody's going to pick me up, and life is going to change dramatically at that moment in time. I did that, did not look back. A white car, Iranian made car, stopped by. The guy who had a picture of me asked me to get in. I got in the car, closed the door. He sped away. It was about 8 a.m. I remember I just looked back and I could see my mom standing by that bus.
Mm.
30 some odd years later, I still can't tell this story. So I felt like our eyes kind of locked in, but she couldn't really see my eyes. There's sun, just directed at the back window of the car. So
Glare,
there's no
yeah.
way, the glare. So, but I could tell she's crying out loud inside, but she cannot show any emotions.
Mm.
So the car made a left turn, and that was it.
Mm. Mm.
And just even now, I think about she had to get on the next bus,
Go back.
24-hour ride back to Tehran and then to Shiraz. What a ride that must have been.
Mm. Can't even imagine. So what's the next step? I don't want to give away all the stories. But
No, I know that there's a lot more there, details. But they took me to a safe house. The smugglers. They took me to a safe house, and I was in that safe house till about 10 p.m. About 8 p.m. 4 Jewish girls also joined us because there's this other boy who had come along with us as well. 4 Jewish girls joined us, and then at about 8 p.m. when it got dark, they asked us to go out to the courtyard of this house. We got into that truck, the boys in the front. There was me and this other boy, plus the driver and his support. And they said their prayers before we got on and they were Sunni Muslims, which about 9% of Iranians are Sunnis. They're highly persecuted by the Shia Muslims in Iran also. The girls, they had to go in the back. It was a Grand Cherokee Jeep. They got in the back. They were
Did you have a
covered by
suitcase,
tarp.
or what did you have with you?
I had a duffel bag with like very few, small duffel bag, probably no more than 10 pounds. What do you take when you don't even know if you're going to survive the ride? So the girls were in the back, a tarp over them. We left the courtyard, and the guy started driving really fast. And this is the old truck, so you feel the speed. And there was a turn, and there was moonlight. There's a turn that the truck had to make a right turn. And I'm just thinking that why is he not slowing down? There's no way he can make that right turn at the speed he's going. When he got the turn, he turned off the lights, just went straight off the road. And so the truck is all over the place. He went into a riverbed and continued in that riverbed. And every now and then somebody would come out from, appeared like a hole in the ground to just tell him not to go this way, go the other way, because there are border guards potentially that could see you. And if
So
they
he's
were
got
to
a
see
network
you,
of
he has a
kind of
network everywhere.
Yeah.
And if they were to see you, they would not stop you. They would just use rocket-propelled grenade to neutralize you.
Wow.
They wouldn't get themselves in trouble because they knew that the smugglers also have guns and so on. And ultimately, we got to a place that we could see the border guards guarding a stretch of highway. And we're about maybe 500 yards away with lights off. At a bit higher up, we can see them, but they can't see us. And as they were the patrol drove away, maybe it was a mile away, we crossed the highway. The guy who was his support ran out, swept the highway to make sure there are no tire marks left behind. And we went on for another half hour. There are motorcycles waiting for us. We got on those motorcycles, went on for another hour till we got to a place that they had literally used dynamites to close a valley by getting the mountain to collapse. And we got off the motorcycles and we started just on our hands and knees climbing that barrier that they had created. And then we went on a hike for over 5 hours. After the hike was complete, as the sun was coming up, we got to the other side of this mountain. And I tell people that the best way to visualize it, think of the movie Lawrence of Arabia.
Mm,
And when you see the sand dunes and that's what it looked like.
mm,
I I felt like I'm gonna die. I literally collapsed. The six of us that were getting smuggled out. From a distance, I saw a truck coming, and as the truck got closer, I saw that the steering wheel was on the right hand side, and I knew I'm in Pakistan. But I had just illegally entered the country, so the
mm,
journey has not ended; it has just begun. And I'm also in one of the roughest places on the planet,
mm,
where Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan meet is not a place you want to be.
mm.
Um, so this went on. I mean, it was this was just the beginning of what would take 3, 4 more days before I made it to the first border town
Yeah.
called Quetta, Pakistan.
And you describe all of the adventures you went on. It just goes on and on and on. It's jaw-dropping what you had to endure at age 16.
But
Just,
I
it's
tell people,
terrifying.
think about what the government must have done that a mother thinks that this is a safer path.
I think about that in terms of economic refugees and
Mm,
immigrants coming to the U.S. southern border,
yeah,
and families having to walk the Darien Gap in
yeah.
Panama.
The Mediterranean, how many of them get killed?
Yeah, yeah, crossing Africa, crossing the
Yeah,
Sahara to but how bad must it be
yeah,
where that is seen as a better option?
yeah. I say this often to people, and now I say this with joy. I'm a proud American.
Mm,
Um, this is the country that has helped me realize what human rights looks like. The first time I experienced human rights was when I went to the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad, Pakistan. And when I told them that I want to go to the U.S., they did not laugh at me. They showed me a path that how I can do that. And but I say I'm a proud American because this is the country that gives that teenage me completely on the other side of the world hope. Whether you like it or not, it's not China or Russia. It's this country that gives hope. And I think that's a spiritual destiny that we have as Americans. It's a privilege to be in a position to give hope to the world. We don't want that to diminish. We want that light to shine brightly. That's a good thing
mm.
that we have been chosen to be the people to give that kind of hope to humanity.
You came to America as a political, religious, persecuted refugee.
That's right.
America has taken in economic refugees, immigrants from all over the world, people that have gotten an education here and started lives. And, e pluribus unum, out of many, one. Um, it's great in theory. It hasn't always been practiced in the United States, as you know, with our
Yeah.
treatment of African Americans and Native Americans. But it is something to strive for. It's something to not give up on. And you're a part of that story. Moving forward in your story, and because I don't want to steal all the juicy stories from crossing the desert, I love the fact that you and your brother Frank were enamored with cars. Tell us about that and the founding of the car,
Yeah.
AutoWeb.
So you got to keep in mind, Modesto is very much of an all-American city. One of my first experiences.
It's
This is
lowriders, muscle
it
cars.
is, and even beyond that. So like I love to learn more about the U.S. I got to tell you about this that uh, George Bush Senior visited our high school. Who was standing next to him? Chuck Norris, because he's from Modesto.
Oh my God,
So I'm
that's
experiencing all of these wild things, and then you've got American Graffiti Night that was filmed there, and the culture of cruising was very much
yeah.
alive.
Hmm.
So every Friday night, Saturday night, me and my friends we would get in our cars and go down McHenry Avenue. And the first time I was shocked that in this Central Valley town, why is there bumper to bumper traffic at 10 p.m.
On a
every
Friday night.
Friday?
Yeah.
And of course, the idea was to collect as many phone numbers as you could, and just meet as many people as you can. And
I love that you went from being spat on the streets of Iran to cruising with milkshakes at 11 p.m. and listening to Probably Van Halen
Van
or
Halen, Bon
something.
Jovi, and
Yeah.
whatever else that was going on.
What a cultural trip.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was an amazing experience being there at that time. And I think those years Modesto were pretty special. I'm bummed that they have banned cruising in Modesto now. I had owned many cars since I'd arrived in the US. My first car was a Pinto. I saved $600 and I got my first car, and I
Yeah.
was so excited about getting that. And then I bought
You overpaid.
I overpaid $600. I should have paid probably 580. And then I bought a 1976 Camaro, which I absolutely
Nice.
loved.
That's a great car.
It was a gas guzzler, and I could barely afford the money for that. But then I owned many cars. I bought a Nissan Pulsar, if you remember those cars.
Sure.
I hated it
It's
though,
so ugly.
because I would drive it during cruising. Guys would try to catch up to me thinking there's a girl driving the car. And they would catch up, they would look, they would get all upset that, who the hell are you driving a Nissan Pulsar? So anyhow, so I sold that. And I bought a convertible Datsun pickup truck that had a massive boombox in the back. But yeah, I owned 16 cars by the time I was 23, and all cheap cars. So
You knew something about buying and selling cars.
I loved
And
that.
fixing cars.
And I would make a little bit of money on them every time. In 1994, I graduated from UC Davis, and my brother graduated from Chico State. And he had gotten a job at Microsoft, and I was still trying to figure out what I was going to do. And he basically one day called me up. He said, "Hey, what do you think about starting a website about cars?" I'm like, "Sounds amazing, but I have no idea what you're talking about." I had never been online. So he came to my home and set me up on CompuServe. 90% of people who are listening to this have no idea what I'm talking about.
Super early days of the web.
Yeah.
This is
Especially
like
dial-up service.
this is like AOL. You'd get those CDs sent to you in the mail, and
Yes.
yeah,
And then you connect, you hear a bunch of beeping noise and so
DSL,
on.
yeah.
Finally, you connect. And so I went online and I loved it. I thought, oh my God, this can be amazing. So we decided that we're going to start a company providing information about cars online. The whole idea was, let's educate the consumer so they'll know more about cars than the car salesman. And today, if you want to buy a car, you'll know what's the invoice price of that car.
Sure.
We were the first to ever offer that, and the dealers hated us for it. But then they soon realized, well, the consumers are going to come to the website. It's good for everybody. So they ultimately, they reached peace with us over providing all the information that we were. So that became the beginning of AutoWeb, that we founded that company in 1994. This is, of course, way pre-Google. This is right about when Yahoo came about. There were fewer than 5,000 domains that were registered.
Wow.
So I remember we wanted
Can you imagine?
We wanted to register a domain name, and we could have gone anything, car.com, auto.com, autos.com, anything you can imagine. And I remember that we thought, well, autos on the web, AutoWeb, makes sense. Now, of course, if I could go back in time, I would just register all those domain names.
Yeah,
Forget building a
own them.
business.
Yeah.
And sell the domains later. You'll make even more money. So
AutoWeb grows by leaps and bounds, and you're working with dealerships, and you're connecting consumers to dealers. You were a pioneer in that field of someone Googling something and filling out a form and then getting connected to and then you get a percentage of that, right? Is that how you built the business?
So think of it this way. Speaking English is one thing, but speaking English good enough to sell to car dealers is fundamentally a different thing. So I'm still improving my English. I've been in the US only for about 6 years. And so I'm going to car dealers, door to door, knocking on the doors. And you know how chaotic dealerships are?
Yeah.
So I'm going there, trying to find the GM or the owner and try to get the guy to pay attention to me so I can sell him something. I went to 150 of these meetings. Nobody signed up. And I remember I would go to them in advance of it. The night before, I'm listening to Anthony Robbins. I'm reading Wayne Dyer's books. I'm reading Zig Ziglar. And then right before going to my meeting, I'm listening to Guns N' Roses to really pump me up. So I'm energetic and excited and show up, try to sell them. After 150, my brother said that, should we just stop? I'm like, are you kidding me? Colonel Sanders went to 1,000 meetings, could not sell any of them. And he ultimately did. I've only gone to 150. And 150, nose closer to a yes. So we'll keep going. And finally, we were able to sell, and that kind of opened up the floodgates. And but it was not easy. But at the same time, we found a lot of really amazing people along the way that kind of became our champions and became people who wanted to mentor us and help us down that path. I mean, the names like Norm Turner, if he hears this, he knows who he is. And if it wasn't for
Norm doesn't listen to this podcast.
He's a realtor, you're right. Today, he used to
Yeah.
run a Honda store.
And you then take AutoWeb public. There's an IPO. How many years later? A couple years later?
We first had to raise a lot of money along the way from VCs, and no VC in Silicon Valley would give us money because, think of it, two guys who did not go to an Ivy League school, and they speak English with thick accent. So we had to go all the way to Fort Lee, New Jersey to raise money. And I think that we're probably the only ones from
A
Silicon
lot of
Valley
money in
who-
Fort Lee, New Jersey.
I know exactly. Just don't ask where it came from. But we raised money there, and ultimately we did raise money from Silicon Valley later on. But after the company had achieved, greater level of success. But in 1999, so 5 years later,
Okay.
we took the company public, and that is definitely when you're there at that moment. And 10 years ago, you had crossed the border without having a passport, without knowing where you're headed. You realize that this is one of those things that probably only happens in America.
It's an astonishing story. When I was reading your book, I was just floored by the fact that, you begin the book and you're staying in like the Mandarin Oriental Hotel or something in Manhattan, getting ready for an IPO. And like 11 years previous, you were crossing the desert and like eating dirt. And then a few years after that, trying to learn English out of a dictionary and selling pizzas. And then at community college. And then here
Yeah.
you are, with VC capital and launching a business. You can't say only in America. Maybe there's some other countries that could happen. But regardless, it's an absolutely
Yeah.
astonishing story. And
I mean, if you think about, if I look at my tax return 5 years prior to that, it was, I think, $12,000. And then it was like 24,000 the year after. So I was poor. I
Yeah.
was really poor
yeah,
until I wasn't. And then there was this IPO.
yeah,
And so it was definitely a life and a journey that I was not expecting. I did not think this is going to turn out this way. I felt that we had a passion for cars and we were building a business out of passion. It wasn't until a few years into it that we realized that this is bigger than us. And there's something happening that is, some people calling it a revolution or whatever it is in the technology world, that we just happen to be a part of it at the right time.
yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make is that after I took AutoWeb public, I realized that there are aspects of capitalism and the way it is practiced that are fundamentally flawed.
Mm.
That, I felt at some level a bit empty, that, that I am a part of this system. And I felt that, almost all of us, we want to be of service to others. We find joy in that. Why is it that nonprofits they stand for the betterment of the world, but for-profits, for the most part, for greed and just maximization of profits? Why aren't we combining the two? I mean, when you think about an average entrepreneur in Silicon Valley or anywhere that loves to build and sell or take public,
Yeah, like the people on Shark Tank.
what happens after they do that? Well, I got to do one bigger. Why? Because I define myself by the level of success I had with that one exit. But why? Why isn't there more to it than just that exit? Or if your company is already doing $1 billion in revenue, why does it necessarily have to do $2 billion in revenue, regardless of the negative impact it could have on society, on Main Street businesses, and so on? Why should Amazon grow from 400 billion to 800 billion? Why? These are the questions that I think most businesses don't bother to answer. And this is why our primary, we call it a tagline, but that's the governing principle that we care about at One Planet is innovation plus intention. People ask me, what do you think about AI? Are you afraid of AI? I don't know. Am I afraid of the innovator? If I'm afraid of the innovator, then yes, I'll be afraid of AI also.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it is the value system of the innovator that determines if the invention is going to be good or bad. Snapchat recently released this thing that you get to rate your friends. Is that good or bad? I don't know. What was the intention behind it? Was it just money? Or was it because you saw a real value that somehow rating your friends will bring friends closer?
But doesn't this go back to kind of ultimately like Milton Friedman philosophy of capitalism, that capitalism is purely there for profit and competition? And if there's anything ethical to be found in capitalism, that's because of the will of the people and the will of the consumer. So if consumers only want to buy ethical products, then they're going to buy ethical products. But if they just want cheap, convenient products, they don't give a fuck about
Yeah.
ethical. So, so many people would say that that's not capitalism's role. Capitalism is a system, and that the free market will determine everything. Screw kind of ethics and morals, kind of putting any kind of moral template on top of capitalism.
Yeah. Milton Friedman, for sure, is the version of capitalism that we are, an extreme version of it that we are right now practicing. But here's the way I would present it, that Milton Friedman's version is about me and how I can maximize my profits and shareholder profits and so on, maximization of shareholder value. I would argue that if, as an entrepreneur, I truly want to be joyful, again, it's self-serving. If I want to be truly joyful, I'm going to need more than money, because I can show you a ton of entrepreneurs who have taken companies public for billions or sold them, and they're not joyful. So let's be self-serving. How can I be more joyful? You can become more joyful if you say that I need to combine my business with impact, with positive impact on humanity, by making the world a better place and having a conscious knowledge of how I'm going to do that. The moment you do that, an interesting thing happens. Your business actually becomes a better business. Because people actually like to work with those kinds of companies.
Yeah.
And employees don't like to leave those kinds of companies.
And consumers like to be a part of those kind of companies.
So oddly enough, these companies are actually not low performers.
Yeah.
I would invest in them.
You have well-paid, loyal, employees.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people that since 2015 that we went down this path in my businesses, we have by far been able to beat our peers in the market, even though, again, given the principles that I try to employ, I say that I don't want to be in a business that our success should be the cause of someone else's demise. Otherwise, I'd rather be in a different business. I don't want to compete with anyone. But the fact is, if you run a good business, the consumers will choose whoever they want to choose, and they happen to come to a business like ours than one that does not care about these kinds of values.
What are some of those values? How do you put them in place in One Planet Group?
Sure.
If someone was a business consultant, was coming from the outside and looking at it, they would say, oh, here's what this business group does different than other business groups in the Bay Area.
The number one thing is love for everyone that you're dealing with, is love for humanity, and looking at as every human as a noble creation. That if I look at even my competitor as someone I'm going to have love for, the way I'm going to treat them is going to fundamentally change.
How do you instill that as a philosophy in your employees?
That's our number one core principle in the company, leading with love. And so what that means is that, and we have a whole culture training around it, but basically what that means is that I'm going to consider the impact of my financial decisions on people around me. And there are consequences. There's a ripple effect. Let's talk about the ripple effect before we say, yes, let's move forward. So that's one. The second thing is that we put our money where our mouth is, that we believe that we need to sacrificially give. And we don't think that just because we are good at, let's say, software, we can also solve the problem of education in Africa. Who says so? There are people that they have dedicated their lives to that. So we rather go find some of those people and adopt them as our nonprofit arm, as people who know it the best, and let's support them to do the good thing that they do. And more of the good thing that they do. So, and sacrificially give to those causes. So I think that as a business, giving 1% is a check mark. I don't want to be a check mark. I want to do real things. So we give as much as 20% of the profits of the business. We have service days that we tell our employees, on these days, you get paid whether you do service or not. Service comes from the heart. You can't be forced to offer service. But on those days, we pay you to go out there and be of service to humanity. You decide how. There's one thing we prefer that you don't do, and that is don't serve political parties on those days because by nature they're divisive. Yesterday was one of our service days, and our teams in 11 different countries all over the place were offering service, and that's a beautiful thing
Mm.
because it brings joy to them while they are on the clock.
What
They're
about
making
profit
money.
sharing?
Profit sharing is an essential part of I did that for multiple reasons. One, because I believe that that's the right thing to do. But then the second thing is that people are so conditioned in my world that they want the company to sell or go public so they can have that big payday. I'm like, forget that big payday. Let's have a payday every quarter based on the success of the business. So you share that success.
Mm.
Uh, those are some examples. And I believe that by employing these, we also do another good thing, which is we put a cap on how big a company can become. And I think that's a good thing. Do we need global dominators? I don't know how that benefits us. I don't know
Mm.
how,
Mm.
I've met Jeff Bezos, seems like a nice guy, but I don't know if Amazons of the world are necessary for the world. I think, are we better off because we have fewer people vying for business because many of those local businesses have gone bankrupt and so on? I don't think that necessarily makes the world a better place. So I do think that diversity of businesses, diversity of options for
Mm.
consumers
Mm.
is a good thing. And I like to think that when you build a business based on cool, I call them spiritual principles, but these are timeless values we can all buy into, I think puts a cap on how big these businesses become. And that's a good thing.
It's an incredible story, Payam. I admire you so much. I love you so much as a brother. Um, why now? Why'd you write this book now? What's your philosophy?
I've written this book 3 times, but then every time I thought that why would anyone want to read my book? So I had to rewrite it in order to get to a point that I was happy with it. I felt that this book could help a lot of people because these challenges in life have helped me. And I thought maybe people can just read about these challenges and the stuff I've dealt with, and maybe they can get the same thing out of it without having to go through the pain. I like to think that this book can bring hope to a bunch of people, bunch of teenagers, all the way on the other side of the planet, that there is hope.
And
I
speaking of which, is there going to be a Farsi translation? Is this going to be made available in Iran somehow?
Oh, that's a good question. My publisher is not in favor of that because they cannot sell it in Iran. So we need to figure it out. Not
We can
not
hire
now.
some smugglers to bring
I know a
Farsi
few of them.
versions
Yes,
over the Pakistani mountains, reverse smuggle into Iran.
exactly. But I mean, there's also immigrants in this country that I think that they
Yeah.
will find this book interesting.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs, first-time entrepreneurs or second-time entrepreneurs, that they can just read about the struggles and how they can probably build a better company that would not just feed their pockets, but also feed their soul. And ultimately, I would say that any executive, any CEO, that they're struggling with bringing meaning to their businesses, I think that this book can potentially help them. At the end of the day, though, I think that this book is supposed to be a reminder that crises and victories are the two sides of the same coin, that don't run away from them. Crisis get you ready for the next set of victories. And when you have those victories, know that crisis will follow too. So this cycle will keep going, and that's okay.
Right. Right. You certainly have known some crises and you've certainly known some victories. And thank you so much for sharing your story on Soul Boom.
Thank you, Rainn. I really appreciate the invite.
You're the best.